Welcome back to Trekking and Politics. This video is part two of my conversation with my friend Scott. He's a subscriber to Trekking and Politics and constantly commenting on the videos. Really appreciate him being here and being part of Trekking and Politics. And this is part two of our interview. And in this video, we are talking about owner operator problems and different trucks and different problems with different trucks. And towards the end of the video, we start discussing a little bit of problems with trucks and EPA regulations and stuff like that. It's a very interesting video. If you haven't watched part one of my video, I'm calling it the Trucker's Lounge, the Trucker's Truck Stop Lounge. So if you see that thumbnail and at the bottom it will say featuring Scott, go back and watch the first video, and this is part two. It's a very interesting conversation and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching. My truck's an '05. It's
hmm
parked at home right now, but I find stuff on it a lot, that I go through and replace, and it's original parts on it. I replaced the bushings that go on the rear end, and that was all original. It was really hard getting those off because they've been on there so long, they dropped
Yeah.
to the stem where they mount to and everything. So yeah, I totally believe it, and
hmm
it shows the durability of trucks too.
hmm
For it to last that long.
Yeah, and the cat that I have in the shop right now, that's going to be its first aftermarket head. That whole engine as of now is also all original, from when it was first bought. It's been overhauled twice, and they use the same whatever it had on it. So, but
So
yeah, it's going to be aftermarket now.
for people that don't know, we know each other. We've talked about this situation and everything. You moved up to an owner operator position. You bought this truck and everything, and Um, it seemed like a good truck. Like you were saying, you talked to the owner and everything. Everything seemed legitimate about it and everything. But you've ran into a little obstacle where you're down, and uh,
hmm
it's like the some of my experiences. It's like you picked a bad shop or you picked a bad situation with the shop or something like that, and it's
Yeah.
got you down. I've been there myself. I know what it feels like. I'm really sympathetic towards you. I really am because it's
Mhm.
happened to me too, and that's a lot of what's wrong with my truck is repairing stuff that a shop has broken on it. Instead of doing the repairs, they actually broke stuff on my truck. So um, it that's a hard thing to get over,
Yeah.
and I really feel for you on that. But hopefully you will overcome it, and you'll be a successful owner operator. That's what I wish for you. Um,
Yeah.
so how is that whole situation? How does that make you feel? Does it bring you down as an owner operator to where you wish you would have never become that and just stayed a company driver, or is do you just see that as just part of the game of it?
I was absolutely disappointed. Like today, I was even really down, and my wife had to help bring me back up because I was like, man, I feel like a complete failure. I had checked all the boxes so this would not happen to me, and it still happened. And I said, and I was in a good shop at first. They would have had it done a long time ago. It's still in the shop, and it would be half the price what these guys are quoting me.
Sure.
They're just throwing so much extra things at me. And I do give them a little benefit of the doubt. Like, they did reveal a couple things I didn't know. And I'm like, okay, good on you for finding that, but you still did not ask if you could do that. I'm not okay with unauthorized work. You just did the labor and you're really fighting me on it, but I was in a good shop. I didn't want to stay there because it was far away from home and I'd have to get a hotel. And there's no telling what they're going to find until they take the head off,
Right.
So I was like, I could be down for a week, week and a half. If I'm going to be down that long, I want to be home with my wife,
Sure.
and not in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, in a hotel. And yeah, so, but now that I know what it is, that would have been the better choice. I mean, these guys, they're the same company, so they should have the same opinion about the work that needs to be done, but they don't. So the head cracked. I thought at first it was my throttle pedal and the TPS sensor
Sure.
going out, but I replaced that. I found that wasn't the answer. Then I finally took it to CAT, and they diagnosed it and said, "Oh, your engine's been overheating." Um, and then they traced it, to the radiator reservoir, and we saw it bubbling. And I had seen that before, but I didn't think it was enough really to be air bubbles in the system. I thought it was just regular, just because it was rushing through
Right.
so quick. And they're like, no, that's air. And then they put a clear line on it, and there's these huge bubbles moving through it. And they said, that's your problem. It's either your air compressor or you blew a head gasket. And they couldn't do the work right away, so they referred me to that Peterbilt. Um, I actually went to another one first that my wife's cousin is at right now. I guess his neighbor used to be the shop manager there, interestingly enough. But they were way too busy too. So I took it to another Peterbilt, like another hour away, and they were real nice. They got me right in, and they said they could do the work. They diagnosed it. They said it's something with your head because the air compressor is fine and it wasn't showing the symptoms of that. It's your head, and we won't know till we take it off. And so decided I want to be home. Took it to another Jackson Group Peterbilt, and they got it off, and then they sent me a rebuild quote, and I'm like, what is this quote? Like they told me the liners were in spec, they told me the cylinders barely had any wear, and I called them and I asked them about it, and they said, oh yeah, we're just leaving that option available for you if you wanted it. We could do. I was like, okay, well yeah, I don't want it. It's only about halfway through the rebuild, maybe less, because it's in really good condition, it sounds like. So I want to get my use out of it before I
Right.
overhaul the engine. I plan to do at least 1 million, hopefully. And he said, okay, we'll requote you. He sends me a quote, and it would only save me $2,100
Wow.
from a rebuild. And I'm like, how is that possible? And they added on, I'm not even kidding you, like hundreds of gaskets, O-rings, and seals. And I asked him, you really need all of those just for the cylinders? And he's saying, yeah, anything that touches oil and fluid, we can't reuse. And I'm like, I'm no diesel mechanic, but there's no way there's that many in that one area. I could see going into the bottom end and everything. They did take the oil pan off to undo the crank to lift one liner out, and that's how they found one of the seals was singed, I guess, from the head blowing. I guess that they said they seen that with every single blown head. The seals get singed. I don't know if I believe that because the other guys that were going to do the work, they said I haven't seen that every time.
Right.
We fixed it for guys and they're back on the road and they never come back for quite, and it's not for the same issue when they do,
Yeah.
and so I'm a little
Unfortunately,
suspicious of,
not. I'm sorry, but unfortunately, I mean, I've been an owner operator from '07 to 23. We could sit here for 10 hours and I could tell you all the horror stories that
mhm.
I have been through with an owner operator truck. And I just wanted to add one thing in, and I am real sympathetic for you. I've just I feel guilt, even though I have nothing to do with your situation, because I wish I could have gotten to you sooner and talked to you sooner and helped you out more. That's where I have a guilty feeling about it. But for just one thing I want to point out, a lot of drivers out here, older drivers, younger drivers, it doesn't matter. It seems like everyone has this stigma about Volvos. You know, they're bad
Mhm.
trucks.
Yeah.
You know, and they would
Mhm.
say, "Well, that's your problem." Well, you have a cat engine, which has zero to do with the Volvo whatsoever. You know, and so that's not it. I just wanted to stress that. And another thing, um, a lot of people, I think, have this mentality that, like a long hood Peterbilt is like the most premium truck that you could ever buy. You know that you will never have any problems, and you can run it just 100 million miles and never do anything to it whatsoever. I owned one. I owned a 379 extended hood Pete, and I wanted to tell you an experience that happened to me with that. I went to start it one day and it didn't want to start. It just click click, you know.
Mhm.
And
Like a dead battery sounded.
right, and that's originally what I thought. I got out and checked out everything, and I put a voltmeter on everything, and I saw that we were getting voltage to the starter. So I assumed that it was a starter. There's a trick you can do to it. You can take some type of metal extension or something, and put it on the solenoid on the starter. Tap it. You don't want to just hit it like you're, a pile driving it, but just tap it a little, and it will sometimes turn the solenoid enough that it will catch and start. And it worked, and that happened. I drove it to a shop just like a mile up the road, and the guy said, "Yeah, we'll throw one on for you real quick, no problem." He had this really old mechanic there. He was like 70 years old. I figured he had, 30, 40 years of experience at least, knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Come to find out, he was a new guy. He had just started working there and
Uh-huh.
had no experience. He ended up putting the positive and the negative backwards on that starter. And when they hit the key, the entire dash, everything under the hood just went up in smoke. It just,
Oh, gee.
it cooked every wire in that truck. I mean, I mean, there was literally flames coming out of the dash and smoke. And that truck was never right after that. They replaced a bunch of wires. They went through and did everything that they could see that was wrong with it. And man, I mean, it just never was right after that. I mean, it it would just come up every once in a while. You drive down the road and hit a bump, and the truck would just shut off with you, and you'd
Mm.
have to go out and start trying to find out what wire had broke or what had singed into, and try to find it. That truck was such a headache after that,
That's
and it
such a shame. Because sometimes it could be the most minuscule thing and no human eye will ever catch it. But the engine knows it, yet it's not going to tell you
And
when it's
that's the
that small.
setbacks of being an owner operator. I tell that to people all the time, and I try to convey that it doesn't matter if you have a Volvo or a Peterbilt, or I know a guy that has an almost new Peterbilt right now, and it's just problem after problem after problem with it. And
Is it
it's a
Packard?
fairly new truck.
Is
So
it Packard?
yeah,
Yeah. But then again, and I hardly ever hear this, but the guy that sold me my truck, he has a T680 with a PACCAR, about 500,000 miles on it. Hasn't had a problem yet. I was like, you're the first person I talked to with a 500,000 miles that hasn't run into an issue yet. He's like, yeah, I mean, I fixed small things on it, but I was like, well, I hope it stays that way for you. I love how PACCARs feel. They feel awesome. I was like, this is so cool to drive, but they'll fail on you eventually. It's kind of a shame. I think I heard it was over engineered a little bit, and they don't line up well with the emission system, like kind of like all the trucks. I think Cummins has it figured out the most, in my opinion. But
yeah, I really wish, and we've talked about this before, but I really wish that they would, and I don't even know how to even go about doing that, and without even just going in and shutting down the EPA totally. But things were so much simpler before to where, like on my truck, I mean, the only emissions on my truck is that it's got two turbos because it's
mhm,
the twin turbo cat, and that it has that, and it has these things called actuators that are on the valves that open up a little bit whenever you're pulling a hill so it doesn't smoke as much. But
mhm,
that's it. That's the only emissions that my truck has. And none of that stuff has ever gave me any trouble whatsoever. That little bit of emissions has never gave
mhm,
me trouble. It's been other things on the truck. But you just hear nowadays, I guess from like 2010 when they came out with it to now, it's just you have all of the problems with the truck, with the electrical system, with normal stuff that goes wrong, and the added expense and the trouble with the DEF system too. A lot of owner operators can't handle that. I mean, you see what you're going through, what I've went through, and then you add a DEF system on top of that. I mean, it's just
mhm.
I wonder how they can even be owner operators
It
anymore.
honestly would have probably happened earlier to the truck, and I'd be going through something else right now. But you know how much more heat the engines go through when they have the emission system on them. It's just insane the amount of heat they have to endure. And as you know, Cat just stepped away completely because they're like, this is not how we make engines. Our customers are starting to hate us. We're done with heavy trucks anyway. But
Yeah,
um,
they've
yeah,
actually
and
came out with a cat engine in Europe, from what I've heard anyway. They're actually testing cat engines in Europe that they do really well with them, but they've partnered with someone. It's not just a cat engine; it's another
mhm.
manufacturer. But I just don't like it myself. And I know a lot of people say, well, it's because you're old and you're not used to change and you don't like new things. Well, you know, you're younger than me and you're using common sense. You don't like it either. So, I mean, I don't really understand
Most of the
why.
guys saying that are company drivers too, and it's like you don't. None of the expense is on you. You don't have to deal with any of it. Your company's got that covered. And even if you do break down because of it, then your is your downtime. And they don't pay you well to sit. Unfortunately, they would give you like $100 for the day. That's nothing. Um, so it is affecting you if it happens. My wife says the same thing though. She's like, "You sound so old. You sound like you're driving in the 70s." I was like, well, I believe these people, and I've already seen it for myself, and I know people personally that's happened to, so I'm on board. And I kind of want an old truck because of that. And And I've just always kind of been a rebellious, argumentative person.
Sure.
So it's against the mainstream, so I naturally go that way. And it usually is also what feels like the right way to me. I don't just do it because it's opposite. But she made those comments, and when I got the Freightliner electrical issue, like the whole thing went bad, and then emissions issues back to back. And she was like, man, this is just validating everything you said, and now I'm never going to hear the end of it.
Sure. Right.
I said,
Yeah.
you're right. I'll try and lighten up on it a little bit, but you're right. Like these are my worst fears coming true right before our eyes,
You
you
know,
know.
and I got a lot of flack from people. That's why I would never got cause you any issues or whatever, for the Volvo, because that was my mindset when I sold. Um, I had a W9 after the Peterbilt. It was a long hood W9, and ended up selling that truck. My mindset was I was going to go to a dealership, and it's a lot like what your story is. I
Hmm.
checked off everything. They made sure that it went through the shop. They made sure that everything worked on it. It had good tires on it. The brakes were good. The interior was just like brand new in this Volvo truck. No rips. It didn't look like someone had broke the dash on it or anything. It was really, really good shape, and it came with a warranty. And I thought, I'm going to get a break here. I'm just going to go. I can run. I can make money. I've got peace of mind. Very first trip out, the very first loaded trailer I hooked to and took off, the DEF system just took a crap on me, left me on the side of the road.
And
And
isn't that just a shame
I
too?
mean, that's depressing, because I was like doing all of my homework and I had all these years of experience and I knew that I was doing the right thing
Hmm.
and it didn't work out. So, I mean, it happens to all of us, and it's just all of these newer trucks, they're just so more complicated. I wish I could go back and buy a brand new 2003 model truck. And I don't even care what name is on it. I don't care. I mean, just a brand new 2003 model truck. And I would be happy with that because everything was so simple on those trucks. And they're making them
Hmm.
so complicated now that, you know, it's not. Sometimes, you wonder if there's ever going to be a path for being owner operators again.
Yeah, and that's something everybody needs to think about when they hear us running our mouths and complaining about these new things. It's all leading up to trucks we cannot work on. It's all dealership work. You're not going to know how to work on an electric truck unless you're Elon Musk or someone like that. And even if you do, there's so much programming that goes into it. You have to have this software. Who knows if you're even allowed to have the software? Maybe you have to have some kind of certification, some business to have it. They'll think of everything they can to block you from making it doable for you. That's kind of what they want, and they are catering to the mega carriers. They have a history with that. When the EPA came in and put their foot down, who was able to survive with that? The big guys. Hardly any little people did, unless they really stayed ahead of the game. But if they had 10 trucks, they're like, I can't afford 10 brand new trucks. And I've come to learn now that most of it is California. So there's California guys going out of business. They're not going to register my truck come whatever year,
Sure.
and they're like, I just can't buy all new equipment. And that's going to be the standard if you want to drive here. And a lot of people in other states just lost a lot of business because a lot of their customers were California customers. It I just to me that's evil because in the name of climate change or whatever clean air, which Yeah, I believe we should be breathing clean air, but I remember breathing just fine back then. I lived directly in California when all this was going on. I didn't even know it was going on. But I remember people idling diesels all the time, and now they have no idling laws there. Um, they're repaving my cul-de-sac that I lived in. That truck like never shut off the whole job, you know. It didn't put a
There,
hardship on me,
there's a
and
video going around, and I've tried to catch it whenever I've seen it, tried to download it, but it's a guy in a mechanic shop, and he's working on I believe it's a National Guard pickup truck that's got a diesel engine in it. I believe that's what it
mhm.
is. It may be an army truck or something. But he lifts the hood and he points at it. Everything on that truck is completely factory deleted. It has no DEF system, no EGR valves, no EGR cooler. It's just the base diesel engine, and it was done that way from the factory because the government didn't want to deal with all of that problem. That makes me so angry. I just want to scream my head off. Why is that good for you? But people like me and you, we have to put up with the crap.
Yeah, the government is exempt from it. That is another great point. Fire trucks, they're deleted. They're allowed to be deleted. Any government vehicle that runs off diesel, they do whatever they want to it, and it's fine because it's serving the government. And it's like, yeah, I am glad they're deleted because the last thing you'd want is a fire truck to break down when it's on the way to put your house out, you know,
Right.
or have some kind of problem. Um, so yeah, they should be, but yeah, why don't we get that benefit? And that should tell you something. They're admitting that it's a problem. Because if it wasn't, then and it burns cleaner that way, then why aren't you letting the fire trucks burn cleaner? You know, um, why don't jet engines have emission systems on them? You know,
Right. Well, it's a
those
point
things nothing just burn
on the last
completely.
video, the last conversation video I did with my friend, uh, Midnight Rider. He brought up a really good point, and if you think about this, it totally makes sense because the way this EGR system and everything works, it takes your exhaust and it reroutes it and it puts your exhaust back into the engine to burn it a second time, maybe even a third time, to try to
Hmm.
burn off this extra carbon. If you're putting dirty air into your engine, why do you need an air filter?
Yeah,
And he brought
yeah,
that up, and
exactly.
when he said that, I just stopped and I thought, why would you need an air filter?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it does. The EPA was we were trying to calm everyone down about it and be like, you need to be getting better fuel mileage. There'll be positives to this. Just trust us. And they're talking about the EGR, the recycling, and you would think in your head that that would give you better fuel mileage because now the valves are timed differently, to put fuel in your system. And if it's coming around and burning excess exhaust and able to run off that and get another stroke out of those pistons, you would think that would save, but it's constricting the breathing of the engine so much. You're sacrificing fuel. The engine is now making up for it in other ways, whether it's kicking in the turbo or shooting more fuel in there because it's trying to breathe so much. And you usually don't notice it until you're clogged up. But
Yeah,
yeah, this put a lot on them.
I've heard a lot of people say like this truck here, I don't know, it's a 2022 or 23 Cascadia, and I've heard people say this is like 400 something horsepower, but if it was deleted and had none of the stuff on it, but just the same engine, just none of the emissions, it would be more like a 600 horsepower engine because it would just relieve itself so much to where, it could just drive and operate. And, they're just suffocating these engines for what reason? I mean, and DEF is
That
really not proven either, in my opinion. That's a
it's
chemical.
not.
I mean, you're spraying chemicals out of your exhaust, so who knows the health risk to that?
Yeah, the plants at least usually were before able to absorb it and give us oxygen because and that's the exchange system we have with the plants. And of course it could get to a level where it's overwhelming and then it affects the environment, and people's lungs and all that. There was a point where it's too much, and the industrial revolution, we didn't know how to burn anything clean at the start of that, but yeah, I mean, even the Freightliners with their 10 miles per gallon, that they can do, they'd be doing even better. You get 12, maybe 13, you know, the newer trucks that get better fuel mileage because I think it's because they're more compact, and it's valves and just technology advanced, they do get good fuel economy considering. And if that wasn't a thing, they get a lot better. And at the same time, that's saving the environment too. The less fuel you can burn overall, is better. And you'd be burning less fuel without that. And then when you regen, you're really using a lot of fuel because now it's shooting it directly into the filters and igniting it to cook all that stuff and turn it into soot, and then what does it do? It spits it out on the ground, so it
Right.
really doesn't make any sense. It's like it's got to come out somewhere. I
Oh,
know it eliminates some carbon and NOx and whatever, but the death fumes are so toxic, they'll kill trees, so it's like, okay, now you're killing the plants running this system instead of at least getting a bit of an exchange from them and letting the environment or the ozone filter it out. If we just focused on making vehicles more economical, we could cut a lot down.